I didn't want to give the okay identification.
Good evening. Early evening. Welcome to a regular City Council workshop meeting for Oak Harbor City Council. Today is October 23rd. It is 5 p.m. I'd like to call the meeting to order and recognizing a fairly long agenda, urge everybody that's got presentations to work to stay close to your time if you can. It's my understanding Mr. Almberg will be leaving us at 6:45, so yes, we'll certainly get the business items out of the way first. We do have a couple of action items, and before we start those, I would entertain a motion to authorize Mayor Pro Tem Munns to participate in this meeting and vote on the action items.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second to authorize Mayor Pro Tem Munns to participate in this meeting and vote on action items.
Who is also a brand new grandmother.
Mayor Pro Tem Munns, can you hear us? Oop. Okay, congratulations, Grandma. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We have 3 council members here and Mayor Pro Tem on the phone. So are we expecting more to come? Do we know? Okay, well, we have a quorum with Mayor Pro Tem. So item number A under action items is Veterans Memorial Park Waterfront Trail Enhancement Authorization to Award. And I guess let's go around real quick before we do this and introduce. I'm Mayor Bob Severance. Joel
Servadius, City Council.
Tara Heisen, City Council.
Nikki Esparza, City Attorney.
Alex Warner, Project Manager in Engineering.
Rick Almberg, City Council.
So we're going to turn it over to Alex Warner, I'll bet, at this point in time, right?
Thank you,
Alex?
Mayor,
Yes.
council members. I have today for you the Veterans Memorial Park Waterfront Trail Enhancement Authorization to Award to Neptune Marine LLC. So this project is located along Pioneer Way at the south end of Northeast Regatta Drive. The bluff adjacent to the waterfront trail sloughed in February 2013. We realigned the trail away from the bluff. This project here will have a permanent realignment of the trail away from the bluff, and it will be enhanced with a scenic viewpoint, architectural wall, pervious pavers, informational kiosk, and landscaping with irrigation. And this project is federally funded through the Transportation Alternatives Program. Here's a few pictures of the current state of the trail with the detour away from the bluff. And here we have the improvements we intend to construct. We have the realigned trail, planting 6 Gary oak trees, informational kiosk here, memorial bench. Flagpole will be relocated. This is the scenic viewpoint with an architectural wall. And the existing memorial for the veterans will remain undisturbed. A few cross sections of the project show the added landscaping and the distance away from the bluff. So we had public bids that were opened at 2 p.m. September 17th of this year. Our engineer's estimate was $141,994. The low bid from Neptune Marine was $177,510.08. So even though this is a grant-covered project, we have a few costs that are not included. Those include some administrative assistance, advertising the project, local permits, and the local oak trees. In addition, the overage from the engineer's estimate to the low bid and an allowance for the city engineer to grant change orders if needed. So at this time, we are going to be requesting $57,665 in local funds to proceed with the project. Patricia will discuss a bit further with the next action item on that. So with that, we recommend a motion to have, to authorize the mayor to sign the construction contract with Neptune Marina LLC for the Waterfront Trail Enhancement Project in the amount of $177,510.08, and authorize the city engineer to execute contract changes up to $18,000 in total and add up to 21 contract days in total as may be necessary.
Okay, so before we take that here at the council, we'll see if anybody from the public, since this is an action item, would like to speak or ask questions. Okay, not seeing any. Bring it back to council for questions, or, yes, Councilor Servadius.
Just a question to get a better understanding of the grant process. So the overage, did we apply for a grant just at the engineer's estimate, or if the engineer's estimate would have been higher? Would we have applied for more and got more? Help me understand how that works.
Yes, so when we applied for the grant, we had the engineer's estimate, which we proceeded with the $141,994. And we can go to the granting agency to request a difference, but we have not initiated that process at this time.
But we plan to. The concern is we don't want to lose our construction window, and we've had a lot of delays. Because it's federally funded, we had a disadvantaged business enterprise goal. We advertised, we got one bid, they didn't meet that goal, they partially met it. WashDOT said can't award to them, and we went through a process to get the DBE goal eliminated because there aren't any subcontractors or contractors that can help us meet that goal with this type of a project, this small of a project. So we finally got that done. I think the one bid that we did get the first time we advertised was close to our engineer's estimate.
Yeah, it was about $145,000,
Yeah.
but
And,
WashDOT rejected the bid
they
application.
rejected that one, and that bidder did not bid the second bid.
And so, I'll support this. I know it's gone on for a while, but so what is the process then moving forward? How do we?
I think we just need to contact the granting authority for the, I was going to ask for the local oak trees, the overage, and then at the end of the project, I believe we can wrap up the final construction costs.
Yes, but they will not pay for advertising.
Right. So someone, is that Alex raising his hand, is going to get back to us and keep us apprised? Okay.
Yes, I would.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, any questions?
No,
That was a no.
not at this time.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Councilor Omber?
Thank you, Mayor. Alex, when I look at the breakdown here by this bidder, they've got $2,500 in there for unexpected site changes, and that's basically what your change order allowance of 10% is. So that's kicking us up to $20,500 for a small job like this. You know, and there's a lot of unit prices in here that can be moved around through city guidance and the engineer. I would like to see that allowance cut to 5%. That takes that number back to 9,000, plus there's 2,500 here. You got over $10,000 for a small project. So I could approve it if we went with 5% on the change order allowance. If we leave it like that, it's going to get used.
Well, we do everything we can not to touch the change orders. I do understand your concern.
If it's not there, they can't touch it.
That's true, yes.
Okay, so they already have 2,500 built into their estimate. That's part of their 177, whatever their number was.
Yes.
So my suggestion, and I hope the council will with me, change that number to 5%, and so we don't hold up the project.
Councilor Lease.
Thank you, Mayor. I would certainly support that, Mr. Allenberg. I agree. I'd rather keep this thing on. This is another one of those things that just kind of continues to grow. You know, I know we've been working on it a long time. Staff's put countless hours into this. I certainly don't want to stand in the way of the project moving forward. Certainly the city's best benefit, but in today's market, if it's there, it'll get used. We certainly, I think council's always supported staff when they've come back to us, mid-project and said, hey, something's come up. We need some additional funds to wrap this thing up, and certainly this wouldn't be any different. If there are change orders that we're going to have to exceed that 5%, that $9,000, which is really $11,500 because there's $2,500 built in, I think, to the contractor's bid already. That certainly we've got ample time to be able, I think, to come back between our two council meetings and our workshop session each month that we could certainly facilitate a change in that. So I'd support 5%.
Councilor Heisen.
Just a clarification, if we reduce it and then they need to come back to us for approval if it goes over, how does that not slow down the project? I mean, wouldn't that make things slower if everything had to stop and they had to come to us to ask for more and then start again? Or am I being obtuse?
If it were urgent, I would be asking administration to ask for a special meeting of council to address it. So we didn't get stuck delaying the contractor, which could then end up costing additional monies for delay.
Is this a contractor we've worked with before?
Yes, this contractor performed the FDOC breakwater repair
Okay.
2 years ago.
How did we feel about them then?
They performed adequately and had a good finished product.
I don't feel really strongly one way or the other. Being someone that we've worked with before, I don't have a problem with the 10%. But I'll defer to whatever my peers prefer.
Councilor.
Yeah, just to address that real quick, within the construction project, it's real common to move line items within the project. Obviously, it comes down to when the very end of the project, if there's no money to move within the project any longer, that's when obviously you have to start digging into the reserves. So I wouldn't see it be a big stopper, obviously, unless it was something that came up at the very end of the project. And typically surprises don't come up at the very end of the project. They typically come up mid-project. So, again, I think I'm pretty comfortable with the 5% keeping the contractor on a little tighter leash, giving the city the staff authority to make those change orders in the contract. And certainly if there was something that came up, they come to us and we support if need be.
Councilor Heisen.
I move to authorize the mayor to sign the construction contract with Neptune Marine LLC for the Waterfront Trail Enhancement Project in the amount of $177,510.08, and authorize the city engineer to execute contract changes up to $9,000 in total and add up to 21 contract days in total as may be necessary.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second that reads exactly like your recommended action, except the 18,000 is really 9,000. Got a motion by Councilor Heisen, second by Councilor Allenberg. Any other input or questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Was that an opposition? Or that was in?
The floor, yes.
Okay, great,
There's a delay.
perfect, we got it.
Yeah.
It passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. We appreciate it. We'll move on to action item B, ordinance number 1886, budget amendment number 3 to the 2019-2020 budget. We have our finance director, Patricia Soul, who has just joined us. Patricia?
Thank you. So before I get into the budget amendment, I wanted to direct your attention to the project information that was attached, starting on page 25. So since this doesn't require action, it's more educational. On page 25, there's a summary of all of the projects that we budgeted for 19 and 20, and it shows the project budget totals, it shows the cash available in the fund, and the balances available in 19 and 20. We can only add the money in the year we're in, so the actual journal entries for 19 have occurred. The 20 will occur on 1/1 of 20. Each one of the projects is separated in its own report, and I won't go into detail on those, but this is how we are implementing the long-range capital plan that we set up during the budget process this year, and we're tracking it and ensuring that there's funding. Because of that, that's why we're coming forth with the budget amendments. Does anybody have any questions on that before I get into the budget amendments? Okay. If you have questions afterwards, please let me know. So the budget amendment will change after the action from the last item, but I'm going to go through what we have, and I've already adjusted the amount we'll be asking for. So because we have new projects, this is a new process, I wanted to do a budget amendment that was just mainly for the projects. There's a couple at the bottom, but this was, there's 6 projects that are in this budget amendment. Bailey's Playground is the first one. This playground equipment came under budget until it was discovered there were pieces missing, and those pieces exceeded the budget by $5,567. We had $15,000 sitting in there for cash donations, but instead we had in-kind donations for $77,421.16, which council accepted via resolution a couple of meetings ago. So those don't help us pay for the cash outlay, so we're asking for $5,567 out of park impact fees to cover that. The next project that's on here is Harbor Heights, and the land's being purchased for $1,150,000. We planned on using part of the $350,000 of the YAF grant to pay for it, but due to the way the land was sold, it disallowed those grant funds. So we identified restricted cash of Sleeper Road sale to be used, as this is a park project and a capital project, which the ordinance said that was the only way we could use it. We are asking for $299,997 to move into the project. It will cover the purchase price. There's also surveying, legal costs, and other things that will come up in this, so we wanted to make sure that there was enough sitting there to cover that. The next one is the Shadow Glen and Lueck Park playground equipment, and you saw a presentation at the last council meeting, I believe, where it showed we were $8,255 over. We are asking to use REIT 2 to cover that, as that was the main source of funds for that project. Portland loos have been purchased, but to complete the demolition, install, there will be additional $75,000 of cost estimated. We had $21,949 sitting in the project, so we are asking for $53,051 again out of the Sleeper Road, because again this is a park project. Waterfront Trail, we were asking for $57,665, but we will have to correct that by $9,000, so we will be asking for $48,665 to move out of REIT 2 into this project, as this is a growth project that would qualify. And then under streets, we did some cleanup under streets. We had an arterial project in there budgeted in the streets capital project fund. We moved it into an arterial capital projects just to keep it clean and transparent. There's been no spending, so there's no actual cash being moved, just budget. And then we had the streets mid-block crossing project with the Oak Harbor School District. They agreed to pay $10,000 to cover some of those costs, so this budget amendment is to increase the project by the $10,000 that they contributed to that project. Carollo amendment that you passed before for the water transmission work was $219,508. It's a large enough amount that we wanted to bring it forward as a budget amendment versus just a budget adjustment from beginning fund balance. And the final one is for Altfield Road water main oversizing. They're pulling money out of the water cumulative reserve. It's allowable of $21,088. The ordinance will have to be amended for the Waterfront Trail. down from the 57,665 to 48,665. But otherwise, that is the budget amendment. If you guys have questions.
So before we take it here at council, we'll see if anybody anybody else in attendance has any questions or input. Okay, seeing none, back to the council for action. Councilor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. Since we're going to be using proceeds from the Sleeper Road property sale to help purchase Harbor Heights, is the, was it 350 in grant funds, will that still be available to
Yes.
do improvements? Okay.
Yeah.
Councilor Omberg.
Thank you, Mayor. What's the balance left in the Sleeper Road?
On page,
She's ready for it.
page 24, 287,140.94.
24.
Yep, workshop page 24. It's right after the ordinance.
287?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Councilor, do you have any more?
That's all I have, thank you.
Councilor Surveys.
Yeah, on the mid-block crossing, you said increase. I was trying to follow all of these, like pluses and minuses.
Yeah, so in trying to follow this one here.
Just, yes,
Okay, so there's funds that are being used internally that won't show up. The general fund project itself, 007, involves a multitude of different projects that I've named here. The Portland Loo, that one is adjusting it for the actual cash that we didn't budget, as well as what we're asking you to increase it. So that's what that 81.
no, I've got that one. Mine was
Okay.
on the mid-block crossing, it says requires a budget amendment to increase the project by 10,000 to cover the contribution of the
Right.
Harbor School District.
So I believe if you take the 280, there's 280 that we moved out of streets, and then I don't have all. Let me see if I have the map here. It's 10,000 that goes into the streets project, which is on your project list. Let's go there first. STR. It's on pound. On page 14, and it's STR pound 02, which is where we put all of those kind of things. The actual project itself was budgeted to be $39,902, and it was $11,000 overspent. So we're putting that $10,000 in there to cover that overage. So, yeah, and I can get you the full math on how the pluses and minuses worked out.
That's okay. Just, thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Does.
So if
Can we say
the,
change is appropriate? Or do we have to note?
we have an ordinance here that we're about to approve with the dollar amount that needs corrected.
So Nikki has,
So there's actually a second spot that needs to be corrected under Streets 102 in Section 1. And so if somebody would like to make a motion to approve the ordinance as presented and allow for correction of the numbers to reflect the decrease in the amount necessary to transfer from REIT 2 to Streets Capital Project.
We're still getting to that.
Do you need this before our first meeting in November?
She said.
I won't be here for our first meeting in November, so, and the next meeting would be the 15th. So if you're comfortable allowing the projects to potentially go negative, then we could wait till the second meeting in November. Or if we want to take a short break and we could do the math and give you exactly what the math is, whatever you guys want to do. We would just adjust by that difference.
It's the $9,000 adjustment on those three lines.
We approve pending.
would you like to just take a break and move on to a non-action item, and Patricia will go and correct the ordinance real quick?
I'd feel better.
Yes.
Yes, I'll go do that.
It's a good plan.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so then we'll move on to one of our presentations. Would that be, okay? So are you guys all right with doing one presentation and then bringing that action item back? Or,
We sure can. We're kind of doing a little combo theme here, so however you
Yeah,
want.
yeah.
We're doing a song and dance for that. I'll move out so there's room.
So we'll probably do both of the community partner presentation and the senior services presentation, and then come back to item B.
Yes,
How's that?
that sounds good.
Okay, so we'll move on to community partner presentations. At this time, Island Senior Resources. Annual presentation. We have Sharon Weiser who is the Executive Director of the Island Senior Resources with us.
Yes, and Mayor, council members, I just wanted to do a little introduction first of what we're
Oh,
planning to do. But you're right on, she is going to present first. But we thought we hadn't ever done this before, but because the two of us together provide comprehensive services for our citizens in Oak Harbor, might be a neat opportunity for us both to present to you, for you to get kind of that full picture and how the things that we do complement each other to serve the people in our community. Just recently, Sharon and Island Senior Resources conducted a lot of research for their strategic plan, which she will talk about and review in her presentation. But as part of that, she came and spoke to council and many other stakeholders in Oak Harbor. And it was really neat to see the outcomes that came from all of those conversations that she had, her and her team, everybody, had. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was when talking about needs of seniors or older adults in our community, the number one need were basically what you might imagine being affordable housing, and food, transportation, those basic, right? Basic necessities. That was the number two thing was socialization, right? Or the lack of which leads to isolation, which is what we at the center focus on, and I'll talk about more. So it's really just, that was, I guess, proof in the pudding. Is that the saying? How seamlessly the goals that we both have kind of complement and work together to serve. So we wanted to do kind of this little joint presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sharon to give you more information.
And I first want to thank the council and the mayor for the opportunity to come before you this evening, and also acknowledge that all of you had input into this a year ago. And I really want to acknowledge how important your input was and how consistent it was. And one of the things that it really drew attention to before I get into my presentation had to do with access. I don't think there was one of you who did not mention the fact that you knew someone who didn't know how to access our services. And I, in that vein, would like to acknowledge a couple people over here. First and foremost, Nancy Bolin-Romansky, who serves on the board and is from Oak Harbor and has been a champion in our board of directors for services in Oak Harbor, North Whidbey, etc. And next to her is Mike Wells. And he is a living, breathing proof of the impact of your input, because he is, as of July 17th of this year, the community outreach coordinator for North and Central Whidbey. And what he is really focused on is building further understanding in the community of all the resources, including what is provided by the center here, and also really increasing access and building partnerships. So with that, and deep acknowledgement to Liz. She is a delight. I am so grateful to have her here, and the kind of esprit de corps that we enjoy with the center, and that can only get better over time. So, thank you. So, what, I've given you enough to be here for an hour, and I promise I won't. But it's hard to condense about 15 months of intensive work across all the communities in Island County, trying to learn from residents, from members of church communities, from service providers, from elected officials, and everything in between, about looking at needs, looking at barriers, and looking at opportunities. And so out of that, and I know Mayor Severance attended a Council of Governments meeting in April, which spent some in-depth time looking at what we had learned from our sort of review and scan of the community. And shortly thereafter, our board approved the plan. So I'm going to really focus more on the plan and a little bit about the needs, and then talk sort of fast forward from there to what's happening this year, because I want to call your attention to some of that as well. So we have, I want to read the vision statement that we came up with. The mission, I think, is fairly clear, but Island Senior Resources envisions strong communities where seniors, adults with disabilities, and those who care for them are valued, heard and seen, cared for and about, afforded respect, treated with dignity, and supported to live their best life. And that's really how we are focused, and we see ourselves as a resource provider to facilitate that. On the next page, you'll see 4 community outcomes. We're really outcome driven. I know the commissioner from your area, Jill Johnson, in our interview with her about this very thing, sitting down at Whidbey Coffee over about an hour and a half last October, was very focused on being outcome driven, really looking not only at the big outcomes but the small. And you're fortunate I'm not giving you the 14-page version of all the dot and tittle, as it were, of all the outputs, results, and strategies. It's very specific for each one of these big areas. So we're really, one of the things we had to confront as we went through this process was who is offering leadership on behalf of these populations. And we had to say, I guess it's us. If we look around, who else across all of Island County is going to provide that leadership? So we're accepting that mantle, even though we're doing it carefully, because one can get over their skis rather quickly about that if they're not careful and very strategic. So you will understand that that's part of the pairs of glasses that we're wearing in this regard. We also want increased awareness. We're doing a lot. Mike's an example of that, to try to increase awareness, and I think some of the statistics I'll share with you later demonstrate that. One of the things that we learned a lot about, even though we knew something about it beforehand, and it makes our partnership with the center very, very significant, is that services and resources are so siloed. Very siloed. You've got mental health over here, you've got the health department over here, you've got the hospital over here, you've got all of those different kinds of things. And it takes some extraordinary work to make sure that all those folks are working together. That's where leadership comes in. That's some things that I can cite for you in a little bit, an example of something that we're trying on the south end with Whidbey Health that gives an example of this, to try to catch people upstream who are having issues. So I'll tell you about that in a moment. So we are really, really forging at a very deep level partnerships. We have developed with the Health Department, Human Services Department, and also the hospital, a common referral form. You do not know of how great that is to get all 4 of those institutions to agree on a common format for that. And lastly, we're looking at engaging people in their communities. One of the pieces of that is the awareness part, learning about things. Another part of it is engaging people to volunteer. And I'm anticipating over the next couple of years, and Mike's work and work from other parts of our staff, we hope to do some intergenerational programming that would support access across the generations in terms of involvement with one another, and just really trying to get active communities. So there's some specifics, and I'm trying to be conscious of time, so I urge you to look at the next few pages that drive this whole issue of what we're doing to actively engage each of these pillars of outcomes. And let me talk about the partnership piece for a moment just as a highlight. Right now, we are engaged in a 45-day pilot with Whidbey Health at their clinic on the south end, which may very well carry over up here once we've gone through the pilot process, to have every patient walking into that clinic have the opportunity to go through an assessment which looks broader than just their health issues, at what other kinds of issues are going on in their lives that may impact their health. And we are receiving those surveys from the patients, and already we are catching people upstream who are having issues that would otherwise might end up with public safety, might end up at the ER, have any number of other kinds of interventions required that are much more expensive. And we have a person who is dedicated as a case manager to work with these folks and really leverage the resources necessary to stabilize their situation. We're pretty excited about this. It's a model. And so that's an example of both exerting the leadership, but also formulating a level of partnership that's at a real granular level. It's not something that's just being talked about in a meeting. It's actually meeting the ground. So I urge you to look through here. You know, the reduce isolation piece is enormous, and I know that because that's one of the things that all of you spoke about last year. And certainly what the center's doing is really affecting that. But some of what we've learned is there are people who have no transportation, no friends, no family, etc., who are out there. And as an example, our Meals on Wheels program, which is up 31% in the first 3 quarters of this year, across the board. That's all over Island County. That may be the place where that individual, the only people they see is that volunteer coming 3 days a week. So we're very excited about this plan. We feel like we're going to be monitoring it. We have a strategic planning committee that didn't just die when the plan happened, as sometimes occurs. Good, we got that done. We can put it on a shelf. It's cool. We're good. No way. Our strategic planning committee meets monthly. We monitor progress. We identify what we're learning, how things we need to change about what we're doing, and whether there are new opportunities or new barriers to what we're trying to do. And it's a very exciting place to be. Having been in this organization for 9.5 years, I'm going, yes, we have some real progress in many, many ways. So take a look at the rest of this, and now I want to highlight and see if you have any other questions. We wanted, if you go dive deeper a little bit, I've got some one-page handouts here. And we're building these kinds of handouts for all of our programs, but I brought you 3 today. So Aging and Disability Resources is usually the front door through which anybody who contacts us sees us. We've had an increase here in 25% in Oak Harbor of the number of clients, 25% in the number of individual contacts, just since the beginning of this year. So some combination of demographics, our efforts to increase outreach and awareness is having an impact here. We're doing a lot of outreach events. 46 have happened so far in this year in the North End, North and Central. So you can also look at the next page. We have a family caregiver support program. I know many of you brought up concerns about a friend, a neighbor, whomever who is caregiving. The family caregiver support program tailors supports for individual caregivers. We've had a 39% increase in clients. It's very person-centered, and you help us out by providing the opportunity to use the double wide next to the center for the Time Together program, and that's growing too. It's grown in some, the opportunity to do this up here has enlivened a whole new way of looking at that program. Historically, it was focused on individuals who had some form of dementia and giving respite to whomever was caregiving for that individual in a meaningful community involvement. Through what we've learned up here, we have expanded the populations that we're focusing on to adults living with disabilities. DD clients, developmental disability folks, who often have caregivers who are making a lifelong project of taking care of their loved one and have very limited opportunities for respite. So we now have a special day. Most of the clients that come on Wednesdays to this program here are those clients. Additionally, we have partnered with Island Transit to get vans to be able to have our staff go out and pick up isolated seniors to come to this program, so they have some meaningful outlet. They might not be appropriate for some of the programs at the center, which take a more active senior, but we change people's lives. They have a place to go. They look forward to where that is. So you also have a 4-pager, which profiles the plan, little smaller bite of the same thing. And this, grab a cup of coffee, a glass of wine, whatever it is, a corner of time, spend a half an hour with this newsletter, please. It just came out 2 weeks ago, and it has the stories. And I could sit here and tell you a bunch of stories, but I will hold off and invite you to spend some time here, because the stories are powerful. They change lives, and we are delighted to be with you, and in greater measure, in part because of what you shared with us a year ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. So Liz, are you
Yes.
present?
Yep.
Okay.
I would love to. I think he'll pull that up.
Probably
for-
should introduce yourself to the camera.
Yes.
Most of us know you, but
Yes, Liz Lang, Administrator of Senior Services. So I always look forward to the opportunity to do my annual update, and I know that a lot of you are very familiar with the things that we do, so I'll try to keep it brief and give you the highlights of the exciting things that are happening. You'll see sprinkled throughout these quotes at the bottom. Every year we put a survey out to our members to check in on how they see that we're doing, get input from them to make sure that our programming is meeting their needs, that sort of thing. And there's some quotes along in here that I've pulled directly from those surveys, and of course this is one of my favorite ones. And a lot of them, are familiar faces that we see there quite often and almost come every day, so that's fabulous. Forget one of these. Perfect. So our mission there at the Senior Center and as your city's senior services is to empower older adults in our community for personal independence, healthy aging, social connection, and lifelong learning. I truly believe that our mission and what we do at the center really aligns well with the mission of the city of Oak Harbor, which includes making this a livable community. As you're already aware, we have a higher population than the national average of citizens over the age of 65. So really, our mission, what we do is feeds directly into the mission of the city of Oak Harbor. And as you can see again from our survey, that over 93% of the people that we surveyed selected that they were either satisfied or extremely satisfied that we are offering the programs and the place to help them live their best lives. So part of wanting to increase that, 93 is great, but we're always looking to improve. And something that's been in the works for quite some time now at the center is our branding process. We have been known as the Oak Harbor Senior Center, and after this discussion was started when I first started working as the program coordinator over 2 years ago at the center, and has finally, after a lot of hard work, come to fruition and I'd like to now announce to you that we, going forward, will be known as the Center in Oak Harbor Activities and Resources for 50 plus. So we have had quite the process to do this, as I noted. The purposes for doing this was, again, to better align with the needs of the people that we serve and remove barriers to participation, right? That's what we're there to do. And we realized through the survey process that that word senior was creating a barrier. You can see that quote there, the bottom quote, when I first moved here, the last place I wanted to join was the senior center. But now that I'm involved, I'm so glad I did. I've met a number of people with the same thought. The senior center is for old people. I'm not old, just better and wiser, right? So it was very clear. That was just one example of the fact that that word senior was truly a barrier to the older adults living in our community to come in. And once they got past that word, it was fine, but we want to remove that barrier, right? And also, we're not well known in the community for being identified as a city department, and we felt strongly, because we are a city department, we're proud of that. We want people to know that we are part of the city of Oak Harbor. And so that was another main purpose in our process. And again, just awareness in the community. A lot of people didn't know where we were, and if they did, they weren't quite sure what was happening inside of that building. Not a lot of signage, kind of a tucked down location. And we were pretty much, what I found through our focus groups, we were known as the building next to the pool. You know, that was an alternative for our new name, but we decided maybe not. But instead of being known as the building next to the pool, we're going to work hard to get our awareness out in the community, which we have been doing by participating in different community events outside of our own walls as the center in Oak Harbor. So the process, it was extensive. We did interest surveys, a brand awareness survey. We held multiple focus groups, which we're so grateful to Emma, who helped us as the facilitator of those focus groups with her great talents as a facilitator, and we appreciated her involvement. And we did multiple groups. We did one with members, people who have been a member at the center, you know, for anywhere from 1 to 10 to 15 years. And then those who were over the age of 50, lived in Oak Harbor, and had never been a member of the center. And so it was really helpful to get the input from both. It was really neat to see where they aligned and how they differed in their input. But we took all the information from them and showed them different mock-ups of different names and styles of font, everything. Compiled it all together and got what you see here. We hosted an open house so that those who weren't included in the focus group could give us input. And then we met with some local graphic artists who gave us a professional review of the design that we created and helped us to tweak it there. But and so there we are, and we're very excited to move forward as the Center in Oak Harbor, a place of activities and resources for 50 plus. And on that note, I believe that that's really going to help us to continue to grow our membership at the center. So current members, that's anyone who has paid their $40 membership for the year. You can see that each year we continue to increase in our membership numbers. We're getting so close to that 1,000 that we're hoping to hit that soon and have a big party and have confetti fall from the ceiling. And also just the daily visits to the center have been increasing as well. Our volunteers obviously are a central role to what we do, and we couldn't do it without them. Obviously, the work of our volunteers comes together to really equate, and this is just the amount up there is year to date this year. So it's almost equates another full-time employee that we receive those direct support from our volunteers. And as you can see, this is a good example too of how we've been working to get out into the community more, to make more community members aware. We volunteered the last 2 years running water stations at the marathon and really enjoyed doing that. And then the Beachcomber Bazaar, we had a booth and did face painting by donation. That's Ivy, one of our program leads for our art class. And staff, us, you know the three of us, you know me, Carly Waymeyer, our program coordinator, and Jade Brown, our program assistant. But I just wanted to take a moment to really kind of give them the kudos that they deserve for all of these positive changes that have happened. So in that survey, we did not ask anything about, hey, what do you think about us staff? The question we did ask at the very end was there anything else you want to tell us? And all of these comments about our staff came to that question, which was just really encouraging to read. And you'll see multiple times, you know, those words of improvement, that word improvement shows up. So we really do feel like we are making positive changes at the center. More people are getting involved, and we really have a fabulous team that's making that happen. So back to something that's very important and at the core of what we do at the center, and what Sharon spoke to briefly, is isolation and fall prevention. Those are two focuses. Pretty much anything we're doing at the center is going to fall into one of those categories. The 2000 census stated that in Oak Harbor we had 7.2% of households with someone living alone who is over the age of 65, and then in 2010 it was 8.5%. So the amount of people living in Oak Harbor over the age of 65 alone in a single family residence is increasing. I'm really interested to see what that'll be on the 2020. So we know that we have more and more people who may be at higher risk for isolation, and so that need is continuing to grow, to have these programs and ability and partnerships to help combat isolation and basically all the negatives that you're seeing up there that can come from it. It was really interesting, I actually got this statistic from our friends at Island Senior Resources, our Sheba health insurance advisors, where they said, we played a little guessing game. They said, how many people do you think on island are turning 65 just in the months of August through October? And I was like, I don't know, 100, 200, 300. Well, the answer was 623. 623 people on the island were turning 65 just in those few months. And so that just further shows the trend of our aging population, right? So these are a list of our programs and services. These are the things that we provide that help people come and work through those issues of isolation and fall prevention. Just recently, this is a story I'll share. Sometimes now working in the administrator position, I don't get to connect as much as I did as the program coordinator daily with people at the center. And you know, you get caught up in all the budget and the running of things and the meetings, and you sometimes start to forget truly how good it is, the work you're doing, how fulfilling it is, until somebody comes and sits down in your office and tells you. And this certain person was an 88-year-old widow. She said that she was sitting at home waiting to die because she didn't feel like she had anything left, right? She couldn't bend over and tie her shoes. She was afraid to go out alone for risk of falls. And so she was just kind of waiting there. Her daughter came to visit her, brought her to the center, introduced her to us, and said, what do you want to do here, Mom? She signed up to participate in our SAIL, our Staying Active and Independent for Life exercise program, which is a evidence-based fall prevention program. And she came in to tell me, I can bend over and tie my shoes. I have friends, I've met people in this group who have invited me to participate in some of your trips, so I go on these monthly trips with them. I met other people, right? And now I'm connected, and I have a busy social schedule. I have to turn people down. That's just, oh my gosh, and when I hear those stories, I'm like, it's just all worth it, all the work we do, and it's amazing. And she's just one of so many of those positive impact stories that we're having at the center. And as you can see in this broad list of services, we've got our ISR, our partnership over on the side. There's 5 main ones bulleted there, and it's just a good visual of how what we do really melts together to serve our older population. And travel's a big one for our people, especially in overcoming isolation. These are people who would otherwise not be able to travel off island, whether they're not driving themselves or they don't feel comfortable driving in traffic. But all those words in the cloud are different trips that we've done this year. So far this year, we've gone to 37 local destinations, 3 international destinations, had 828 signups. So that basically is like every week we have a trip. And as you know, our bus has been aging on, and we've been working to partner with Whidbey SeaTac Shuttle to provide our transportation, and so we're kind of currently in the process of doing that. But we are grateful for all of our community partnerships, Whidbey SeaTac Shuttle, and the new owner, Darcy, which I'm sure many of you have met, being one of those. But we are truly so grateful to all the support that comes from our community partnerships, especially the Elk Harbor Senior Center Foundation. As you're aware from the resolutions that you passed and accepted earlier this year, they have funded over $28,000 worth of furnishings for the center this year, and it is just looking so nice in there. Everyone comes in and comments on how new and clean and welcoming it feels, so we're really grateful for that. And of course the ongoing support of Island Thrift, who for years have been supporting us financially on a monthly basis, and Island Senior Resources, because without them we wouldn't have that full package deal of what we need to be serving our community. Also, one thing that's not listed on here is our North Whidbey Coalition for Vital Aging, which is a group of community members that meet at the center every month to discuss the needs and gaps of care for seniors on the north end of the island, specifically in the Oak Harbor area. And one of the things that they're working on right now is emergency preparedness. We have people on that coalition. We have Eric from county and the emergency department there. And we also have people from our fire department have been joining us as well to really give us the true needs assessment for older adults on the island. They've given us a lot of ideas and things to tackle, and so we're starting to work on emergency preparedness with them, including getting Map My Neighborhood. I'm not sure if that's something you're aware of. Started in as many neighborhoods as we can in Oak Harbor, but specifically we're starting with some of the areas that have a higher number of seniors, senior older adult neighborhoods, I guess is what I would say. So we're grateful. We're grateful for the community support. We couldn't do what we do without them or without you. And with that, I would end with a special invitation. We do have only 4 seats left, but we can make room for you at the Fanciful Fall. It's our first time wearable art show. If you haven't ever seen a wearable art show, you should Google it. You will get excited quickly. But we are hosting it at the Senior Center this Saturday. It's a fundraiser for the foundation, and we do have some special runway guests, including Mayor Severance and his lovely wife Rhonda, who will be in full ensembles for the evening. So
You wearing a dress?
I
I'm
never
not sure
said
what it is.
anything about dress. It's a tasteful suit.
Pretty sure it's not a dress.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Your curiosity should lead, right?
Yes. Yes.
A couple of very nice presentations.
Thank you.
Any, yes.
Thank you,
Councilor
Mayor.
Larson.
I'd like to thank you both. I mean, the results and the data are great, and you can see clear improvements. But what I want to thank you for is the passion that you both clearly have for what you're doing and for the people that you're serving. And when you take passion and you couple it with the professionalism that you clearly bring to the table, the results are going to be a natural result of that. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for making people aware of what you're doing, making it available to people, and for making this presentation to us tonight.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, yes. See you Saturday.
We're not done.
Okay, we're going to move back to our second action item, B, ordinance number 1886, budget amendment number 3 to the 2019-2020 budget.
So I actually updated the actual document, so you have that to look at.
Thank you.
So the changes that I made were on paragraph 6 under the Waterfront Trail. That amount now is $48,665. And then when you go to the page that has the table in it, which is the next page over, under Streets Capital Projects, the amendment reducing streets went down to $221,335, and it changed the amended budget to $1,788,582 for that fund.
Make sure there's no questions from the public about this, since it is an action item, okay? Seeing none, council, yes, Councilor Servadius.
No comments? Just thank you. I always feel better
I understand fully.
when it's in front of us. So I move to approve ordinance number 1886 as amended.
Second.
Okay, motion to approve ordinance number 1886 as amended. Motion by Councilor Servadius, second by Councilor Larson. Any other input or questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, we are moving now on to item number A under Development Services. Shoreline Master Program Periodic Review Progress Report. Development Services Director Steve Powers and Senior Planner Dennis Lefevre. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'll keep my presentation fairly brief this afternoon, but what I wanted to do was just give you kind of a progress report as to where we are with this project. There seems to be a lot of things moving forward, so I just wanted to take this opportunity to refresh where we are. As I mentioned at a previous meeting, there are three basically mandated items by the Department of Ecology that we need to look at to do this periodic review for our Shoreline Master Program. One of those is making sure that the updated changes to the Act and the Department of Ecology rules are incorporated into our SMP. We are pretty much complete with that process. We just have to fill in the format that Department of Ecology likes to see utilized for this effort. But we are going to be looking at some changes as we move through this process of review with you and the Planning Commission. So I've kind of referenced some of the changes that we're going to be talking about at that point. Another piece that's required that we look at is making sure that the Shoreline Master Program is consistent with our comprehensive plan policies. Not only our comprehensive plan, but the other plans that influence the shoreline, like the Windjammer Park Integration Plan, the Stormwater Plan. There's a couple other plans that we've looked at for consistency. We are complete with that process. And the other piece of this one is to look at our development regulations to make sure that the SMP is consistent with some of the newer development regulations that we've come up with since the 2013 plan. We've looked at our critical areas ordinance, and we are consistent with that. And I'm in the process now of looking at the low impact development regulations that were created a couple of years ago, to make sure that our SMP and the LID regulations are consistent. Another piece of, well, actually the third piece of the mandated items are, we're going to need to take a look at any changed circumstances, any new information, any improved data that we should incorporate into our SMP update. And one that's been kind of bantered around quite a bit by the Department of Ecology is at least taking a look at sea level rise. So we will look at some of the information, some of the analysis and new techniques that have gone into really basing what sea level rise could do to a community. And of course, we'll have that discussion at a subsequent meeting. And then we're also going to be taking a look at the residential bluff conservancy designation that we have in our SMP to make sure that what we have in both our SMP regulations and our municipal code are reflective of that sensitive area. Of course, with any long-range planning effort, the state is really key on public participation. As we are also, we like to get our citizens involved in something that's as sensitive as the shoreline issues. We do have a public participation plan that's been prepared. It was part of your packet this evening. So that is complete. Another effort that actually is implementing the public participation plan is a web page development, so we can take a higher profile on presenting some of the documents that we're preparing for the Shoreline Master Program. It will also possibly provide a feedback opportunity for our folks, and also will present the meeting schedules so that the folks will know when it's either coming to the Planning Commission, Council, or if we, when we have a stakeholders meeting scheduled. We anticipate to hopefully get that on board December 2nd, so that's what we're gearing up for that process. And the other piece that we're kind of moving forward is, thanks to your authorization last week, we are going to be preparing the Department of Ecology grant for $22,400, and all the pieces that go along with that, the scope of work, the development agreement, and then also the grant management. But we hope to have that complete and into their system by the end of this month. And then, of course, with the securing that grant, which is a given, all we got to do is check the boxes and make sure that our scope of work is consistent with what they want to see. We'll be looking at doing the consultant solicitation for that piece of work on the residential bluff conservancy area. So that is pretty much in a nutshell what we're moving forward as part of this plan. Kind of a broad, high-level approach on the next steps. We're going to be touching base with the Planning Commission and the City Council periodically. We're going to be actually working through the draft documents, some of the changes that I've talked about, probably the first 6 months of next year. We will be working with the consultant, I hope, early in this coming year, and then also have some results from their analysis, hopefully by April or May. Of course, procedurally, we'll have the SEPA review, and then as council directed, we'll be working with the Department of Ecology on that early public comment period, a coordinated process with ecology. I anticipate that to occur sometime mid-summer. And then through early part of next fall, we'll be looking at the adoption process. So that's kind of how we're scoping this out. We do have a lot of wiggle room, as you know. We do have an extra year added to our deadline date, so we're not looking for, well, they're not looking for mandatory approval until June of 2021. So we have some wiggle room, but this is kind of the schedule that we're marching to at this point in time.
Okay,
Any questions?
questions, council? Must have answered them all. Thank you, Mr. Lefebvre. Appreciate that. And looks like Kamak is going to join us next for the CIP and comprehensive plan.
From the SMP to the CIP. Yeah.
Yes, SMP to the CIP.
CIPT.
Welcome, Kat.
So we're doing our annual adoption of the comprehensive plan, and so I'll go over what we're going to cover in the 2019 comprehensive plan amendment docket, and then we'll open it up for questions. So the 2019 docket had 5 items on the docket: the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan. This was adopted by the City Council in June of this year. So what we're doing basically is transferring some of the information like the goals and policies and the recommended plan into the element of the comprehensive plan. The capital improvements plan is updated every year, annually, so I'll go over that as well. At the joint meeting in September with the Planning Commission, we had some discussions on the comprehensive plan, and we talked about some amendments to the economic development element. Zombie policies, if you can remember that. So we kind of amended some of those policies and took some of that language out and just made some minor updates to that element. The housing element is a big one. As you're aware, we'll apply for a grant to Department of Commerce, and so hopefully that will help kind of spearhead some of our focus in how we want to tackle this housing issue. So that'll continue on to the next amendment cycle. And then of course you have the JPA and UGA item that was added. I think we mentioned this before, it's not technically a comp plan amendment. Nonetheless, it kind of deals with some of the issues in there, so that's up front and being discussed with the county. And that'll carry over to 2020 as well. So Just to go over what's coming forward in December for your consideration. Again, the adopted plan. Again, this is no changes here, just what you've already adopted. So this is pretty much a pretty straightforward change. The capital improvements plan, this is where most of the changes probably are occurring. You know, we're in the middle of that 2-year budget cycle, so it's a good time to review the projects and the status of it. We of course take out projects that are complete, and I've listed the projects. Windjammer Park playground equipment, that's complete, so we'll take that off the list. The Portland Loos, Rockbridge water transmission main, and the Banter Road transmission main, those are some of the projects we've completed this year, so we'll take them off the list. We wanted to reflect the projects in progress, and I'll go over some of the spreadsheets to kind of show how we're tracking those. Very minor changes to project schedules. I think there was one change. I can try and point that out. And then we've added 2 projects this year. The Pioneer Way City Beach to SR20 water line replacement project in the year outline, year 2023-24. And then earlier this year we talked about some annexation, and the council expressed interest in trying to tackle that sewer issue that's been kind of like a hurdle in all the annexations when we're considering the area between Goldie Road and Oak Harbor Road. The valley drops down in there, and there's no sewer, so that there needs to be a forced system in order to get it up to Goldie Road. Since due to the multiple property owners, it's better for it to be a public project. So we've kind of added that project in the 2021-2024 timeframe. So those are the 2 projects that have been added. So I have the spreadsheets out here. They're in your packet as well. I won't go into each one of them in detail. I have one for every fund, and if you have any questions, we can always come back to it. But what I really wanted to point out is how we're trying to track these projects moving forward. Just want to say, I mean, the CIP is a planning document, so the numbers are very general. It's, I caution you to compare it with the budget. We try to reflect what's in the budget, but money is being constantly spent as projects are progressing, so it's a snapshot in time. We're just trying to plan for projects and not necessarily reflect, the budget dollars at any what's being spent or not. So what we're doing here is basically the 2020 column here, and I have the approved budget. That's what the City Council approved with the 2-year budget. So those numbers reflect what's in the budget document. However, we have several projects in the 2019 budget year that are still ongoing, in the sense all the money hasn't been spent, and there's going to be some money that's going to carry over to 2020. So some of the 2019 projects are going to continue on to 2020. So we wanted to find a way to show that. So we're carrying over, the balances from the previous years onto the 2020, just to show that they are still in progress. So that's the only thing that we're actually doing to this year's CIP, and it is due to the change that we're tracking all the dollars per project. And the money will be there till that project is closed out, so we want to kind of track it. If we didn't track it, then this would be a blank column. This would be in 2019. It would be confusing a little bit to have that project on there and not have any money shown. So it's kind of a way to show it. And so what this balance is kind of showing, and I have a little asterisk here, is to show that that is the amount as of September 30th, 2019. So in December, when you see this, it'll still be the September 30th mark, but if you look at the budget, there'll be more progress made in some of those projects. So it's not meant to match up exactly at all times with the budget. So it's a planning document. So this is the street fund, and as you can see, some of the projects are carrying over to the 2020 cycle as we continue to work on them. No new projects have been added in this fund. Parks and Recreation, I mentioned we completed a few projects, so we've taken it out. So if you ever want to compare the last year's document to this year's document, you can compare and see that. I do have I think your version has a strikeout version, so it should have all the red line, all the projects we scratched out. This is the cleaner version of it. So I won't go into it through too much detail, but I have all the spreadsheets just in case you have any questions. So the economic development element, as I mentioned, we made some minor changes. I just took some excerpts out of that section just to show the type of amendments we're making, terminology, some changes, took out some zombie policies and put in and kind of combine them to make sense. So that's the changes over there. The housing element, like I said, it's going to continue on to the 2020 docket, so we'll have more discussions on that next year. And so we will do that the same with the JPA and VGA as well. So no action required tonight. We've scheduled this for the November Planning Commission. They'll have a public hearing, and then they'll forward it to the City Council, and we'll probably have it at that second meeting just before Christmas. We either take action on this, on these amendments. So, questions, comments?
Just real quick, Mayor, I want to take this opportunity to thank Patricia and her staff. We're experimenting with a different way of showing some of the information in the CIP, and without their help, we wouldn't be able to do this. So please, as CAC has said, what we have here is a planning document, and it's not to be confused with your actual budget numbers. So thanks to Patricia and her staff.
Councilor Edson.
I like on, it's page 32 of the plan, but 101 of the packet, how the revenue from all the sources is laid out in a table. Normally we've got the project, how much it's going to cost, where that money's coming from, but having the total of what's actually in all those funding sources is, at a glance, I appreciate that picture.
And those tables are being updated as well, so you'll have other tables. But I thank you. Appreciate it.
No, in December, I'm going to come at you and be like, this is not
This
what
is
you
not
showed
the
us.
same. Yeah, I'm just saying.
And this one is a straight up finance table, so
Yeah.
we're good with that. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
We'll move on to the Marina section. Mariners Haven Boatyard update and business plan. Have our harbor master joining us, Chris Sublett.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Tonight, I'd just like to provide a couple updates on a couple things that are happening down at the marina. The first one is the purchase of the boatyard at the end of our parking lot, the south end, known as Mariners Haven. Most of you are aware that we're purchasing it. As we start to narrow in on the purchase, we're looking at funding sources. And you know that we received a $400,000 grant from the Commerce Department. It'll be part of that funding source. And we've also applied and we're working towards a $630,000 grant from the Rural County Economic Development Department of Island County. We're still waiting to hear on that, but we're still going to keep moving forward. As we move forward, we're trying to do some due diligence, and we're looking at consultants for appraisals, for environmental studies, and then a business planner as well. A business plan is a key part of this. This is something that Island County has asked for as part of their grant. So it's kind of interesting that we're going to be doing that, but it'll really benefit the boatyard once we get it, and it'll point us in the direction that we can go as far as managing it and operating it. The total cost of these consultants is estimated to be about $86,000. And the neat thing about this is the funding for those consultants is actually going to come from the Commerce Grant. So we're working towards that as well. There's a lot of paperwork involved with that Steve's working on. So right now where we're at is we're looking hard at appraisers, and it may come your way soon that we ask you for guidance on hiring an appraisal. If any of these fail to work out, if the appraisal doesn't come back at a decent price, if the environmental study doesn't come back in a safe manner or in a manner that we don't have to do a ton of work, or if the business plan doesn't look good, or maybe if Island County doesn't come through with their grant, then we wouldn't be able to purchase this property. So it's one step at a time. It's definitely due diligence, just kind of inching along, inching along, inching along. So that's what's happening with that behind the scenes. Another project that we're working on has to do with the Dnr Lease, and As you might recall, we renegotiated that and entered into a new lease last summer. One of the clauses in that lease is that we do a business plan. And we've thought about many different ways to do the business plan, from in-house to hiring a consultant, just the whole gamut of things. And as we look at it, and we looked at the commerce grant that we received, we thought that might be a good way to fund a professional business plan for the marina. So as we move through the business plan for Mariners Haven, it's possible we may use the same consultant for both. And then the funding source for both would be, again, the commerce grant. So there's some really exciting things happening down there. It's the winter. It's a little bit of a slower time, but behind the scenes, it's actually amped up quite a bit. So we're always busy moving forward. So be happy to answer any questions about these things.
Councilor Larson?
Thank you, Mayor. I was initially a little skeptical about this plan. I like the idea of where it might end up. I also like the way we're going about this, the fact that we're taking that $20,000 for the appraisal, the $46,000, and the other $20,000 out of the commerce grant. So right now, we have limited risk, but we have what seems like almost unlimited potential. So
Yes.
you don't very often find yourself in that situation. Right. So I appreciate that. I was also wondering, would you speak to, especially in this season where we are right now, I noticed there was something in there about the occupancy rates at the marina.
Yeah, the occupancy rates at the marina are the best I've ever seen them for this time of year. We're probably up around 85% occupancy, where typically this year, or in previous years, we're down around 80%. So it's inching forward. The really neat thing about our marina right now is we have waiting lists for everything except for the 28-foot category, and we have a handful of 32-foot covered slips available. So the marina is literally at this time of the year busting at the seams. In the summer, we got up into the high 90s occupancy rate, which was something we'd never seen. You have to remember, with the marina, we have a certain amount of slips, but we may use them in many different ways. So when I say we're in the high 90s in the summer, we're probably over 100% based upon that number, because maybe we put 2 boats in one big boat slip, or, get creative that way, do some rafting and stuff. So the occupancy is looking really, really good. We're excited about that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Heisen?
With those occupancy rates being so high, how is the current infrastructure handling that?
Good.
Good?
Good, yeah. The neat thing about having a full marina is it's better for the marina. So when you have an empty marina, a lot of the wave action, a lot of the storm surge is absorbed 100% by the docks. But when you have boats tied to the docks, those boats actually help float the docks, and they actually absorb some of that energy. So it's really a neat thing. But yeah, it's great, really great. We've got a fantastic maintenance crew that is just amazing, doing wonderful things down there.
And we're getting ready to implement the new fuel line project,
That's right.
which council approved somewhat recently. And so that's an infrastructure improvement that we're making.
Councilor Ollenberg?
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, $400,000 commerce grant from the state, and that's gonna fund the upfront money. What if this doesn't go through? Do we have to give that money back?
No, this is really a win-win for us. That commerce grant, if we do not use it to purchase Mariners Haven, we can use it for capital improvement projects
can.
at the marina.
Okay.
Maybe new power pedestals, who knows what. But, there's some great opportunity there, and like I said, it's really a win-win for us.
Okay, the next question then is on the environmental assessment of $46,000. How'd you arrive at that?
I called a bunch of consultants and talked to them off of the MRSC list, and talked to them and just asked them, how much would it cost? Give me a ballpark figure. And the truth of the matter is, some were at 26 and some were at 46. So we chose to go with the high-end number.
And if I may interrupt, I'm sorry, it includes both a phase 1 and a phase 2 environmental.
That's what I was,
Right,
that was the
yes.
next question.
Yes.
So what level is gonna be
It gets-
phase 1,
it gets-
level 2,
It gets through phase 2.
through the total audit?
Mhm.
And then is that the property of the city then, if we do that audit and we don't buy the property?
Sure, you own
You
the product.
are the owner, you're of the proprietary information that comes out of that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then has there been, have you had discussions with the seller in the event that it is determined that it is a fairly expensive remediation? Where do we go with that?
We've had discussions with DNR regarding that, and they're saying that it's possible because it's their property, a lot of that is DNR property, that they would be responsible, or the current owner could be responsible, or the Navy could be responsible. We really won't have an answer to that until we get the environmental assessment back and they figure out what's in the ground. We know that that's been a boatyard a long time. We know that in the 40s, 50s, it was a Navy shooting range. So there could be a lot of things underneath there, and that's why we're inching along. We don't want to dive into this too fast.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Mm-hmm.
Chris?
Sure.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. We will move along then to Fire Department. Interlocal agreement, Whidbey Island Public Hospital District EMS Services. We have our Fire Chief Ray Merrill joining us.
Thanks, Mayor and
Welcome,
Council.
Chief.
I'm not asking for any money tonight. I am not asking for a penny. In fact, I'm here to get you some money.
Now we're talking.
Now we're talking. So as you know, as you read the packet, way back in 1999, we entered into an agreement with Whidbey General Hospital at that time for them to help support our function in EMS. Throughout the years, we've had a 2-year renewing contract. It was due to expire this year. Roger and Myers and I got together. We spent about 5 minutes talking back and forth. We agreed on the amount that we wanted. They said that was fine. We increased the amount that they pay per call up to $112 and some odd cents. And this will come forward to you at the next meeting for the mayor to sign the contract for a 2-year contract with the hospital. That's pretty cut and dried, right to the point.
Pretty quick. Any questions on
You're
that?
gonna get some money out of this one, about $50,000 a year.
What's the current rate?
We're getting $107 and some pennies. So it wasn't a long discussion with Roger compared to what Central Whidbey and North Whidbey went through.
I like it.
So you'll see this one at the next council meeting.
Okay.
So there's the quick one. Now comes
There's
the
the quick
long
one.
one.
Now,
We are gonna go, oh, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
5-year comprehensive emergency management plan.
So the 5-year comprehensive emergency management plan, I thought I'd review all 243 pages with you this evening, so we knew it's exactly what's in. I know you want to get out of here at 6:45, so I'm going to do my best to really pare it down for you. That's a good thing. So, as you know, we had the 2013 CEMP, and it was supposed to expire in 2018. We sent our 2018 comprehensive plan down in March of 2018 for the state's review. We thought slam dunk, it's going to come right back. And the state sent it back and said, congratulations, you got 42%, it's not good enough. So we asked why. Why wasn't it up to standards? And apparently the state had changed the requirements and the way FEMA writes up the plans. And they gave us a list of what we needed to correct. So we went through and completely rewrote the entire comprehensive emergency management plan. They extended our contract for 1 year. They said it wasn't due until the end of 2019. After rewriting the entire plan and going through all of the steps and meeting with the county, getting their comprehensive emergency management plan connected with ours, and get the mitigation plans put together, we sent our project back down to them. It came down with almost a 90% approval rating. They said, very good, your plan is great, you can move forward with it. And some of the stuff that we got dinged on is we didn't have the date on the front cover. So the mayor and I have talked about this before. So this is going to come before you at the first meeting in November for approval for the resolution for the CEMP. We had planned to do some training on the plan in October, but because of the amount of time it took the state to approve it, we'll probably move that back to November, the 1st of December, and we're going to have a drill up in the EOC and go through this plan and get you all involved as to what your job functions are and how much money you get to spend. Fake money, not real money at this point. This is pretend money. So I try to keep it brief.
You did. Yeah. And when we last talked, we were ahead of way ahead of most other cities.
We are way after.
Like, they're copying your plan.
That is correct. After we rewrote our plan and put all the new ESFs in, the emergency support functions, and the way the new EFSs are established, what the feds wanted before, what the feds wanted now, and rewriting all of it, we're ahead of the curve compared to most other cities and communities that use the CEMP. And we've had people calling and asking to borrow ours.
For how much?
There you
Out of
go.
the goodness of my heart, because I'm such a nice guy.
Any questions? Okay.
I try to keep
Oh,
it
yeah,
brief.
you did. Nice job, Chief. Okay. Back on schedule. Oh, that's right. Yeah. You were. Okay, we'll go to engineering at this time. Friend Marsh Stormwater Conveyance update, and we have our Public Works Director, Kathy Rosen. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Our city engineer is at a conference, so you get me tonight. So, it was a council request that we talk about Friend Marsh Stormwater Conveyance update at this workshop. Where is the? So I'm gonna start with some background about the marsh. In the 1890s, the lowlands, or the slough, were diked. In the 1930s, the drainage system was improved. There was an 18-inch tide gate that was installed, and then in 1996, that was replaced with a 36-inch tide gate. In 1998, the city purchased approximately 37 acres from the Friend family. In 2008, the eastern conveyance channel was realigned to the current configuration, and I've got some maps that'll show this. And then in 2018, summer of 2018, that eastern conveyance channel was cleaned. We removed the vegetation, but we did not make the channel any deeper or wider. We just removed the vegetation so it wouldn't impede the flow. So here's a picture, historical picture of the slough. Scenic heights over here, so you can tell this was all kind of marshy to begin with before it was diked. We purchased the property in 1998, as I mentioned, with approximately 37 acres. We used Island County Conservation Future Funds for that purchase, and the application stated that the property will be placed in use as stormwater management, wetland enhancement, passive recreation, and a small portion for water quality management. So we've been talking about this project that's in our budget for a very, very long time. Most of the property is listed and mapped in the National Wetlands Inventory map and on the city's critical areas map as having wetland present or potentially present. And in 2007, the city contracted with ESA Adolphson, and they delineated the wetlands on city-owned property, and they identified 2 separate areas as wetland. So this is the National Wetland Inventory map. You can see this entire area is called freshwater emergent wetland, and then this is a freshwater forested shrub wetland. Here's the city's critical areas map, and I've got another one that will zoom in so you can see that that area is identified as potential wetlands. This is the ESA Adolphson wetland delineation from 2007. I would like to note that when this was done, this eastern channel was in this alignment, and then in 2007 it was realigned to this configuration. But this entire area has been identified as a wetland. So this is the western channel that runs through the marsh, and this is the center channel that runs through the marsh. This is the eastern channel.
in its current configuration, and there is a relatively large wetland area that's been identified there. So as I just mentioned, there's 3 conveyance channels within the marsh, and they all discharge into Oak Harbor through a common tide gate, that 36-inch tide gate I mentioned earlier. Tidal fluctuations play an important role in the city's stormwater management in the marsh, and the tidal conditions must be established in combination with extreme rainfall to understand the effects on the upstream drainage. Again, the 2 westerly channels have been identified as wetlands, and because the 3 channels meet at the tide gate, flow from the east channel backs up into the center and west channel under certain conditions. So here's the east channel pipes and the outlet. Here's that center channel. You can see that there's some confluence here between those 2, and then the westerly ditch comes in over here, and we have a better photo of that. So again, another picture, the channel confluence, west channel, center channel, east channel, and there's the tide gate. So prior to the city taking ownership of Friend Marsh, the Friend family granted easements to several properties surrounding the marsh so that they could convey their drainage from those developments through the channels in the marsh. These easements run with the land, and when the city purchased the property, we assume the rights and responsibilities associated with those easements. We are well aware of that, and we are working within that. So this was a study that was prepared in 1995. It's Tidegate Study Basin Map. It was prepared by Fakema and Kingma. And it seems as, looking back historically, it seems like this map is what was used to kind of identify those properties that the Friends granted easements to. However, it's important to acknowledge that the actual drainage basin to Friend Marsh is much larger than these properties here. It actually extends, So this is like our up by our water tanks up on Heller Road. That comes all the way down here. This is 24th. This, I believe, is Barrington. So it's a much larger area than just those properties that were shown on the previous map. So I want to go through some definitions, and I really hate to read off of the slides, but I think in this case it's important. These come right out of the Washington State Department of Ecology manual. And remember, we operate under a municipal stormwater permit, an Npdes Phase 2 municipal stormwater permit from DOE. We are required to review developments in accordance with those manuals, and the mayor or the city administrator has to sign an annual report saying that we have done that. They have to certify that that's what we've done. So a conveyance is a mechanism for transporting water from one point to another, and it includes pipes, ditches, channels. The conveyance system is all of those things, including gutters, streams, rivers, lakes, ditches, pipes, channel, retention or detention facilities. Channel storage is water that is temporarily stored in channels while en route to an outlet. And detention is the release of stormwater from a site at a slower rate than it is collected by the stormwater facility system, the difference being held in temporary storage. And the detention facility can either be above ground, like we have a lot of detention ponds, you can see those around town, or it can be a below ground facility. We do have some sites that were developed in the city that have underground storage tanks as their detention facility. And again, it releases it at a slower rate than it is collected, and there is little or no infiltration of that stormwater in a detention facility. And a flow control facility is a drainage facility that's designed to mitigate the impacts of increased surface and stormwater runoff flow rates generated by development. Flow control facilities are designed to either hold water for a considerable length of time, such as a retention pond. There's a difference between retention and detention ponds. A retention doesn't have a release out to a conveyance system. that the water goes away either through evaporation, plant transpiration, and/or infiltration. A detention facility holds the runoff for a short period of time and then releases it to the conveyance system at a controlled rate. So, as I mentioned, we have to operate under our stormwater permit, and the Washington Department of Ecology Stormwater Manual actually has a list of flow-controlled exempt surface waters. And this list does not include Friend Marsh. So I'm passing out that list. So this means that future developments that drain to Friend Marsh may convey their stormwater through the channels, but they need to control that rate of flow. Flow control does not mean that we're cutting off conveyance. It means that the rate of flow has to be controlled. So also in 1995, I showed you that map that came out of this Tidegate study from Fakema and Kingma. That study indicates that the east ditch in Friend Marsh may not have capacity to accommodate an increased rate of flow from future developments north of SR20. So that's another reason for needing flow control from future developments, because that channel can only hold a certain capacity. And we have a study that's budgeted in the current 1920 budget, and we will analyze that capacity of the ditch in its current configuration as part of that study. So again, what does flow control mean? Stormwater runs off of undeveloped properties at a certain rate that's measured in cubic feet per second. So when we talk about rate, it is cubic feet per second. And when you go to model your stormwater, DOE requires that it's your pre-developed conditions, regardless of whether it's been logged, regardless of whether it has some concrete on it or impervious surface on it today. They want you to go back to pre-developed conditions, and they define that as second growth evergreen forest as the pre-developed condition, and that is sponge-like.
Question, when you had one of your early exhibits here with the this is reclaimed property, it was never second growth, first growth, or any growth.
It doesn't matter. This is the DOE manual that we have to comply with when reviewing.
It doesn't make any sense.
Those are, unless it's prairie, which is coming to you in the next couple of months, we will have some areas that we've been able to identify as previously prairie. This is the model that we're required to use. And you go back to second growth evergreen forest as the pre-developed condition, which is very sponge-like. Then the post-development stormwater runoff, because of the impervious surface, it runs off at a higher rate, more cubic feet per second. It's important to control that amount of flow entering the conveyance system so that it's not inundated, because the downstream conveyance system has a maximum capacity that it can handle at any one time. And the DOE manual requires that new developments that are not draining to a flow control exempt water body provide flow control. That's minimum requirement number 7, and we'll get to that, and I'll pass that out. So this is kind of how a development or a modeling the pre-developed conditions works. So you're, oops, I'm sorry, I did that again. Where am I? How did I get so far ahead? Okay, so we've got second growth evergreen forest. You can see that under these circumstances, less than 1% is surface runoff. Under post-development, you've got, with more impervious surface, you've got 20 to 30% surface runoff. So pre-development, about 1% of the rainfall runs off. Post-development, 20 to 30% runs off. So I'm going to go through a very, very simple example. Okay, so say our pre-developed runoff is 1 CFS, 1 cubic feet per second. Post-development is 20 cubic feet per second. Under this scenario, Department of Ecology regulations would allow the development to discharge 1 cubic feet per second. That means they have to hold back some and release it over time. So all the water goes into the conveyance system, it's just released over a longer period of time. And this is accomplished by controlling the flow leaving the site either through a detention pond, underground storage vault, infiltration, evaporation, plant transpiration, those kinds of things. And as I mentioned before, detention ponds and underground storage vaults hold water for a short period of time, releasing it to the conveyance system at a controlled rate. So again, flow control just means you're controlling the rate that the flow is leaving the developed site. It doesn't mean that it can't leave the site, it just has to be at a controlled rate. Okay, I'm going to take us on a little bit of a detour here to talk about where we're currently at, because it is related to some of the next slides. We have a new Npdes Phase 2 municipal stormwater permit that went into effect on August 1st, 2019. That permit is currently under appeal to the Pollution Control Hearings Board, and the appellant, which is Puget Sound Keepers, would like the schedule to be compressed. So our permit requires us to start looking at drainage basins and planning for stormwater drainage basin retrofits, but it doesn't require us to actually do any retrofits in this permit cycle. Puget Sound Keepers says that doesn't do enough fast enough, so they want to compress that schedule and force DOE to require us to start making basin retrofits between now and July 31st of 2024. It also requires comprehensive stormwater planning. And I want to say that that comprehensive stormwater planning requirement under this permit is a brand new requirement. It's an entirely new section under the permit. In the next couple months, you're going to be receiving what we're calling our stormwater comprehensive plan, which is different than this comprehensive stormwater planning that's required under the permit. So the document that's coming forward in the next few months is kind of like our transportation plan. It looks at a 6-year, what our needs are, those kinds of things. This comprehensive stormwater planning model is really more planning based, and is going to require us to look at the impacts of land use and those kinds of things on the quality of the receiving waters and how we're going to address improving those qualities. So the permit requires the planning approach that emphasizes protection, improvement, and receiving water quality and beneficial uses under future developed conditions, and that will require us to look at different zoning and those kinds of things and figure out how that will affect or may not affect the water quality of the receiving body. The reason for this is the recent modeling has demonstrated that the current project-by-project approaches are insufficient to prevent continued degradation of the receiving water quality. And all of the models that have been run project that repair and restoration and large amounts of additional stormwater detention are needed to improve the receiving water conditions. And I don't know if you remember this, but we went through a couple workshops where we talked about this, and council adopted a resolution and sent our comments and concerns to DOE. The permit still requires these things. So the permit requires a stormwater management action plan that requires that we develop that, and that has to be focused on addressing impacts from the collective development in a watershed in addition to the single sites and subdivisions that we've been doing. So you have a stormwater management plan, an SMP, and we're also going to have an SMAP when we get through with this. We have to do the receiving water basin assessment, receiving water basin prioritization, and a stormwater action plan. And by December 31st, 2022, the city must develop a stormwater action plan for at least one high priority area that identifies several different things, but one of them is the need for stormwater facility retrofits and implementation and schedule and the funding. So that all ties in with the project that we have budgeted. And our current budget includes a project to study Friend Marsh. Our concept is to create a constructed wetland in the upland area to treat and store stormwater and release it through a weir at a controlled rate, so flow control. We've delayed starting that project a little bit in hopes that we would get some more information based on the appeal, so that our study can better comply with whatever comes out of that appeal. And then we've also had another drainage project that has risen to a higher priority. Our plan right now is to solicit consultant qualifications later this year, and with the goal to award the contract and begin analysis in early 2020. My goodness, I'm having a hard time with this. Okay, so summary. Some properties around Fred Marsh have easements that allow them to convey stormwater runoff from those developed properties utilizing the channels in Fred Marsh. The easements run with the land. We're aware of that, and we are working within that. As I mentioned, there's 3 channels in Friend Marsh. The west and center channel have been identified as wetlands. All 3 channels meet at the tide gate, and water from the east channel does back up into the other channels under certain conditions. DOE does not identify Friend Marsh as a flow control exempt body of water at this time. DOE manual, which I'm sorry I did not pass this out yet, requires that new developments that are not draining to a flow control exempt water body provide flow control. That is minimum requirement number 7 in the DOE manual. Future developments that drain to Friend Marsh may continue to convey their stormwater through the channels, but they must control that rate of flow. We're operating under this Npdes Phase 2 permit that just came into effect in August. It's been appealed, and we may end up with a compressed schedule, requiring us to do retrofits sooner than we had originally anticipated. So this year, we're going to go out at the end of the year seeking qualifications from consultants, selecting one, award the contract, and begin the study in early 2020. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Councilor Eisen.
Thank you, Mayor. It specifies future developments and new developments. Is there anything in the no pun intended pipeline right now that would be affected by this? Maybe it's a Steve question. I don't know.
Are you,
You're asking whether there are any pending projects affected by the new permit?
Correct.
No, because those projects would have all been submitted prior to the new permit going into effect. So to the degree that the new permit issues, those don't apply.
Okay.
yeah, these documents that I passed out, the list of flow control exempt water bodies and minimum requirement number 7, those are out of the 2014 DOE manual, which we are operating under right now.
Well, Kathy, I saw that appeal list. It was extensive in cities listed. Of course, I checked, and Oak Harbor is certainly listed on there. What is that process? Are some of the cities then working together legally to deal with that, and are we part of that?
So all of the cities in Western Washington that have been identified as Phase 2 cities are under the same general stormwater permit. It's very similar to what Brett Arvidsson described about the nutrient permit that DOE is proposing, a general permit. So we are under a general permit so all cities in Phase 2 in Western Washington have that same permit. The appellant is Puget Sound Keepers,
Right.
and so they are challenging DOE, and we're just kind of along for the ride right now.
Oh, okay.
And I can answer the question about whether other cities are banding together. When this particular appeal to the PCHB was filed, I put out a message on the Wasama listserv and asked if there was any interest in intervening, and there really wasn't. There were, I think I got 4 responses, and the response was really lukewarm. One said they would be interested, but not as a part of a small group. It needed to be a large group. So I think that the reality is that the rest of the cities don't really want to make themselves a target for Puget Soundkeeper and other third-party watchdog groups.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Servatius.
Thank you. So when I brought this up, I appreciate the update very much in the history. Not only did I want as much of an update, but I wanted a conversation, because we've talked about this, as you hinted at, for years. And it's not just, I know people will say, well, it's a project specific, you know, because we have a couple of projects right now that have maybe brought this to the forefront. For me, it's not that at all. We've been talking about this for years when we looked at developing, and I wish Councilmember Allenberg was still here, because I know he's talked about it as well. When we looked at developing the clean water facility, you know, there was that ditch that ran along there, and we thought, well, you know, long-term, what should we be doing as a city? And my conversations always focus on what can we do as a city that we're not, an obligation is not the right word, but maybe we have an opportunity to look at this whole drainage basin and come up, since we have 37 or 38 acres there that was purchased for this purpose, what can we be doing that's more creative and more proactive to help these landowners develop their land to the highest and best use? If a lot of that land is reserved for retention, it's less, you know, space that can be developed, obviously less property tax, business sales tax that can be generated. And it's been years, probably 3 or 4 years ago, I looked at designs that Carl Friend had, that he'd had engineering studies done. I know you've seen those with that whole area. And what I would like to see happen that comes out of this meeting, not just an update, is to invite, and I see Mr. Thompson here, maybe Mr. Friend, Mr. Thompson, to, since they're 2 of the, if you want to say, applicants that are currently in this, to provide that information, maybe a summary sheet of, I don't want to say their interpretation or their experts' interpretation of the law, but maybe some creative thinking as to what should we be doing as policymakers when we plan for the next 30, 50, 100 years? Is there anything we're missing? Should there be more pushback on DOE? I'm curious, there was some articles that I think I referenced when I brought this up. The EPA in September announced some rollbacks that they're pursuing, and the current administration is pursuing with rollbacks on a 2015, some of the stormwater acts that were passed in the previous administration. And I don't know how all that filters down, but to what degree do we factor that in, and how does that, I don't want to be too quick to, you know, close conveyances or change things, or a very simple question as I'm listening to this is, can we change the easternmost conveyance so that it is flow control exempt? Does it need to tie into those other 2, or could that be changed so that eastern conveyance remains flow control exempt? Not that I want to pump straight stormwater right out into the sound. I want to be a better steward than that, but I want to, the purpose of this was to be proactive in bringing this conversation to the top, and I do agree with a couple things wholeheartedly that you said. I mean, it was the Department of Ecology stormwater man, so there's got to be a more holistic view, and project by project approaches are insufficient. So once again, my goal here is to make sure we are all having the same conversations. I've had, you know, numerous conversations trying to follow Mr. Thompson's project. Not recently, but conversations in the past with Mr. Friend. And I just want to make sure we're all having the same information and we're putting our minds together, trying to come up with not as what is the best solution for any one applicant or landowner, but what is the best use of the city's resources that we already own to help these folks develop their property to the fullest potential. So I'll pause with that.
Can I respond to that? I think the city needs to be really, really thoughtful about our projects moving forward. We know we're going to be required to do stormwater basin retrofits, and we have just a few opportunities to do that. right now, we made a purchase of some wetland property on Northeast 7th, or the Northeast 7th wetland. That's one area. Friend Marsh is another. We have another smaller project that we're looking at regarding the Passaic vaults in the future, but we also need to be really careful because we're going to be required to do these things, and if we do them too soon, DOE will not give us credit for those efforts. That, you know, they have everything you do willingly and voluntarily doesn't really count towards future stormwater requirements. I know that sounds crazy, but that's the way that it is. And so we just want to be, I'm not saying we're not going to do anything, and we just need to be really thoughtful on these projects because we do have limited opportunities to meet our permit requirements that are reasonably priced without having to go out and buy up a whole bunch of other lands. So that's something that, you know, again, we're hoping to see what comes out of this appeal so that we can plan a little bit more appropriately with our study and use our money wisely.
Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the comments, Ms. Rosen. Appreciate the updates. Certainly, this has been a problem that has been with the city since I look back 1995, I think, is when we did the first Army Corps of Engineers study looking to incorporate the Friend Marsh area into our drainage program. I know from history there have been several incidents where we've had to actually use that marsh to stop flooding problems down in that area where we've had to install temporary pumps, direct that water into that area. You know, so, you know, I guess from my standpoint, this isn't going to get any easier and it's not going to get any cheaper the longer we wait. Obviously, hindsight's 2020. Back in '95, if we would have maybe taken that study, put all of those things in effect, you know, we probably wouldn't be having the discussion we're having today, right? So I just want to make sure that everybody here understands this is not a developer problem. This is a city problem. This is a city problem that we've dealt with for over 24 years now. We purchased this property in an effort to help resolve that problem. At the same time, this is a city problem because the city, as we all know, is growing to the southwest. That's the area that we know is potentially where all of our new housing is going, and ultimately everything in that section of town, conveyances flow to this section of the city. You know, I've been down there. I've walked the property. I tried to, you know, study up a little bit on this before we had this discussion. I went down and looked at the 3 channels you're talking about. I looked at the amount of water flow, both on a dry day when we hadn't had rain for a while, as well as I actually was down there walking that area in the pouring down rain of a couple of days ago to kind of get an idea of how much water, where, you know, what directions it's coming from. Like I say, there's 3 different rec deals. You know, obviously we've invested a ton of money into our waterfront, our park, which is also draining into this area. There's just really no way to stop that flow. It's all done by the contours that our city has to deal with. We're a bowl, and that is the bottom of the bowl. So, you know, certainly the codes are going to continue to be a moving target for us. Obviously, if we take 2 to 3 years to get a project rolling, by the time we get the project rolling, we find that the new code changes. So, you know, I appreciate your comments. I agree that we have to be conscious. We have to make the most of what we can. We have to use our funds the best we can. I just don't want to see us stymied waiting for this window, you know, because I think we've had a few of those in the past, and I think we've kind of let those slip past. What we know is we have a housing situation that we're trying to address. We know that this is the area of the town that most likely is going to facilitate construction. I'm meaning the southwest section. So I guess all of us, I don't mean to speak for all of us, but I think all of us want to learn more about this and understand this, because this is an issue that has probably gone on a little long, and it has to be resolved somehow, because it is a city problem, and it's not going to go away by itself. The rainfall's not going to stop, and the fact that our culverts down there in front of Burger King and next to the car wash are really kind of the lowest points in town, aren't going to change. That's the contour of our city, and when our outfalls that we currently have can't handle the flow, this is what we have to rely upon to get that water out of our city, is the way I see it. So certainly, go ahead, Ken.
So, thank you, Mayor and Councilmember Wiesner. So, two things. We have two projects in this current budget. So the first one is the Friend Marsh study. $200,000 has been budgeted for it. We've never had money budgeted for that study before. So that will be moving forward through this budget period. The other thing that you mentioned is the flooding that sometimes occurs at high tide and heavy rain in the vicinity of Burger King and the car wash. We have another project that's budgeted, and the design is budgeted, and then in this budget, then construction would be in the next budget cycle. And if you look at your capital list that Patricia always references, there is a pumping station in Beeksma to take care of that flooding near Burger King and the car wash that would pump it through the 42-inch outfall. So we're trying to address both of those things through two separate projects, starting in this budget cycle. So,
What do we call that?
oh my gosh, Patricia's got her list.
Which fund?
Stormwater. It's the pumping.
Advanced flow control and treatment?
No, that's the one over off of Goldie and Easy.
Conveyance, flow control and treatment, is that the one?
No.
Okay, so what's it called again?
It's a pumping station.
We got east outfall repair, west side outfall drainage pump?
East, yes, that one, the drainage pump.
Okay.
Do we have an approximate? We don't have any kind of numbers for that yet, or do?
It's in the budget, Patricia.
$750.
750?
Yes.
Okay.
And can you share with us just a little bit what that's going to look like? That is pumping it back up to our outfall in Windjammer?
Yes, the 42-inch outfall.
But that's
And that
design.
pump would come, and so we start out with the design in this budget cycle, and construction, I believe, in the next budget cycle. So we'll have a pumping station in Beeksma that will, under certain conditions, when the tides are high and we've got a lot of stormwater coming in, that pump will turn on and force the flow out through the outfall. Right now, it just backs up.
Councilor Larson?
Mayor,
Thank you, Mayor. I was trying to make some room for Mayor Pro Tem
Okay.
Bunch, who I think is trying to break in.
I would like to, if possible.
The floor is yours, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I'm concerned, I can understand the roads and we have to be thoughtful, but I also look back at a long history where the city has not kept a word to keep Friends Marsh maintained. Back in 1990, through the flooding of the sewage plant and city park, city maintenance crew breached the Friends eastern dike and flooded a large portion of his land. I have not found anything that said they finally got unplugged. The city installed SR20 diversion and it's currently plugged, and I haven't found any indication that that has been unplugged, and that's been since 2011. When the city gives its word, we should be able to keep that word somehow. It's been a lot of years and a lot of staff. But since I've been on council every year, Carl Friend has said, are you gonna do some maintenance on this? This is way behind. And part of them selling it to us was also a fabulous gift. And I just feel like city's got egg on the face. Because we haven't kept our word. And through all of this, even with the planning of the future, we made a promise to that family who's had that land since 1850, a grant through President Grant to get the land. So, I'm sorry. When the city gives its word, it needs to back it up, and I want to be sure this is in our plan, please. I can understand we need to wait for some items, but I can look back at years and years of studies, most of them paid for by Carl Friend, some of them paid for by the city. And then the fact, like Mr. Om pointed out, since when did we become a green forest sponge area that was never down there? How can they classify us as that? Just because they can? I'm sorry, there's got to be a way to push back and look for a compromise to our situation also. Thank you, that's all I have.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, sure.
So there's a couple of things that I'd like to say about that. Number one, we did maintain the ditch. We did clear out all the vegetation in that eastern conveyance, which has not been classified as a wetland. We did clear that out in the summer of 2018. And Carl Friend worked with us on that because the stuff that we took out of that ditch we stored on his property before we hauled it off. The second thing, that plug in the pipe that comes under the highway was that section of pipe was put in before the state overlaid the highway so that we would never have to come back and dig that up and tear into the new asphalt on the highway for the diversion. And that diversion is what we're talking about as part of our friend Marsh study, where we would take and create a wetlands to treat stormwater. So what that pipe does is it takes some of the flow off of that goes through the 42-inch outfall. And we haven't unplugged it yet because we haven't done the study that tells us how best to develop that treatment facility within the uplands in Friend Marsh. And until we do that and create that treatment facility and set it up so that we can release that flow at a controlled rate into the ditch in Friend Marsh, we don't want to unplug that because it will inundate the eastern channel that can't take that additional flow right now. So that's why that plug has not been removed. And then the other thing that I wanted to say, oh my goodness, now I forgot.
Sponge-like.
Oh, the sponge-like. So we understand that. We have an appointment with DOE staff, their wetlands experts. They're coming up next week to take a look at the property to see if it can be classified in a different way. So we are working on that. We are not ignoring that. The schedule is based on DOE staff availability, and they will be here next week. Thank you, Steve, for
Thank you,
reminding me.
Ms. Rosen, very much for answering those questions. I just needed to put it out there. And thank you very much for your explanation about the plug. And I did see that in June of 2018 that we had gone through and I guess rotor-rooter the ditch. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, all we did was remove the vegetation so that it wouldn't impede or reduce the capacity of the ditch. We did not dig it any deeper or wider to increase the capacity. We were advised that all we could do was remove the vegetation that might be impeding the flow.
Councilor Servades?
Did we remove the roots too? So was the eastern conveyance ever flow control exempt?
Not to my knowledge. So remember, we're operating under the DOE manuals. So back in the early 90s, there was not a DOE manual. Now we have one. So there is no vesting with environmental regulations as far as I know, and Mrs. Sparza speak to that better than I can, but we have a manual, we have a permit now that we have to operate under. And so I'm not saying that circumstances weren't different in the past, but we have something today that we have to operate under.
So I'm wondering if like we took some of, Mr. Bill Shields came and talked to me and incorporated some of those comments. One thing, can we invite a summary paper from, I mean, I guess I'd ask for it anyway, but a summary paper from someone that Mr. Thompson might use or Mr. Friend has used in the past. And can we collectively then take that information and make a decision as a policymaking group? It's, once again, I understand DOE's authority, but at the same time, I think we might have some ability to have a different interpretation than the easiest interpretation, which is none of it's flow control exempt, and it just, you know, everything's locked down and you can never discharge anything into the sound.
Well, again, people can convey in those channels, they just have to control the rate of flow. No one is stopping conveyance, and we've never said we were going to stop conveyance. You just have to control that rate of flow. You have to hold it back and release it at a controlled rate.
Councilor Wiesner?
Ms. Rosen, on the subject of DOE coming up, I just want to make sure that I understand. So DOE, you have an appointment, they're coming up, and what the purpose of that is to go look at this present development that's near this that's proposed, and look at that land, or what's the purpose of the DOE visit?
The purpose of the DOE visit is to look at Friend Marsh. Remember, up here on the screen, I have the entire drainage area in the city that flows to Friend Marsh. We are not focused on just one development. Any retrofit we are going to do in compliance with our permit, we're looking at the entire drainage area, not just one development. And so we want to have DOE come out and look at the marsh, look at, okay, it was a slough. Do we really have to look at this as, you know, initially as second growth evergreen forest when they do the modeling, or can they use some other way to model it? Also, is there any way or any potential for it to be flow control exempt? We are not looking at any specific development. We are looking at this entire drainage area and how that marsh functions.
So we're looking at and having a conversation with the DOE about the entire drainage areas having to use the second growth forest model when doing the calculations, i.e. the 1 cubic foot of runoff would be the standard that the entire drainage basin. We're asking the DOE to consider the fact that most of this area is not, nor was ever, second growth forest, and that we're looking for a different model from them that we can use.
Possibly, or you know, is there a way for this, or the eastern channel to be flow control exempt? Maybe it needs a different outfall. Maybe it needs to go through a different tide gate and not mix with the other two channels that are wetlands. But it is not specific to one development.
I guess my concern is that we're specific in how we're dealing with DOE, you know, just based upon experience I've had in the past. You know, sometimes if you know, we're inviting the wolf to the hen house to an extent, right? We're asking for them to come take a look at a conveyance we're already using, and sometimes, you know, that's just not a good thing. So I'm just concerned about what it is we really plan to achieve out of that meeting. Is it a direct request then to make that east channel flow exempt? I mean, is that what we're asking them to look at?
We have asked them whether or not Friend Marsh is a flow control exempt body of water. They have told us it is not.
Okay.
Some people disagree with that. We want them to actually come out to the site and look at it so that there can be no feeling that staff misrepresented what's out there in the field, or certain conditions. We'd like DOE to see it firsthand.
And are we preparing some history on this east channel? I mean, to sell this idea a bit? I mean, you know, you say that some people think it's not. I mean, do we think it's flow exempt? I mean, do we have an opinion upon that based upon the history that we've gathered up since?
We do have an opinion, and under the current circumstances where the 3 channels come together and go out one tide gate, there is impact to the wetlands. It does back up into the wetlands. The 3 channels are hydrologically connected that way because of they, you know, under certain conditions, the flow from the east channel can back up into the west and the center channels. That is our opinion. That is the opinion of our city engineer.
So we're actually looking for DOE to come confirm the opinion.
We are looking for DOE to come out and make that determination. We are not trying to sway them one way or the other. We have given them background information. We've given them the wetlands analysis. We've given them other studies that have been done. So they do have, they've already had that background information. And they're bringing whoever they feel is appropriate on their staff to come out and look at it.
And in that meeting with them, do we have any ideas or any suggestions that we're gonna offer to them as to how maybe we get to the end of this? Or is this basically a, hey, we want you guys come, we want you to take a look, this is what we think, we want you to either confirm or deny it? I mean, just wondering, I mean, are we taking it a step further?
Again, we are not trying to sway them one way or another. We want them to come out and make a judgment on their own. We're not saying, this is what we think, please confirm our analysis. That's not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to get an unbiased opinion from DOE.
Mayor, would you mind if I answer? Mr. Weezer, I've not been directly involved in this, but I've been somewhat involved with it. And I think that a way to characterize this is they've already given us their opinion from afar,
Okay.
right? And what we've suggested is, why don't you come look at it in person? Let us know whether that's still your opinion. And I'm saying the same thing that Mrs. Rosen is, just in a slightly different fashion. So we've gotten their opinion from the office, but I think we all know that there's no substitute oftentimes for actually just walking the ground and kicking the dirt, so to speak. And that's the whole purpose, is whether or not they will still come to the same conclusion when they see it in person.
So we've questioned the decision that they've made, and we've asked them, we've said, hey, we're not sure that this is the right decision. We want you to come up and take a look at it and make sure that your decision's correct.
Well, I think how I would characterize it is that we know that there are individuals who are interested in that conveyance who have a different opinion. And we want to be sure that ecology has all of the facts necessary in order for them to reach their ecology's decision. And that way we can strike the best balance between all of our competing interests in this area. And, you know, you spoke to history earlier this year at Mrs. Rosen's request, and did a fairly exhaustive review of the history of this area. You know, all of the past studies, all of the various easements, all the various short plats and binding site plans, sort of tracing out who owns what and who has what rights. And it's clear that when the city purchased that property, we purchased the obligation to maintain that as a conveyance. And that's been very clear for a very long time, but we solidified that in March of this year with some research. So I think we take that obligation very seriously. I think what you're hearing from Mrs. Rosen is that she's also trying to strike a balance between the city's other obligation in this area, which is our permit requirements. So getting the people at ecology who either can say yay or nay, who can either make your life easy or difficult, getting the right people on the ground at the right time, that's the goal. And since it is a much larger area than any one project that we're currently discussing, it's not project specific, which we think is important. It is a community issue that we're asking for their on the site opinion.
Thanks, Misty.
Councilor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree that there's no substitute for boots on the ground and actually being able to see a site for yourself. So I'm really happy that they're going to come out and check it out. have to be prepared to maybe not like the answer that they give us or like it, but once we're all on the same page, then we can start focusing our energy towards finding a solution, because this map is incredible. Because if we're then going to be asked to start retrofitting things, it doesn't. Joel touched on this about getting everybody's ideas together or opinions together, which the more ideas the better. But any time spent putting energy into that until we are on a firmer footing, again, no pun intended, I think wouldn't necessarily be productive. So I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say, and once we have the final word, and once they've seen it, they probably won't change their mind from afar again, then we can start really looking into solutions and outfall and all of the things. This is going to follow us around for a long time, I can tell.
Councilor Servatius.
Thank you. So I guess my question or thought is, and I was CC'd on the DOE's response, I don't think they're going to change their mind up close. The question is, looking at those drawings that I've seen that Carl had from years, and I mean, I don't know how many years ago those were, should the eastern conveyance become or could it become a meandering conveyance that becomes flow control exempt? And does that serve, and it may not, but does that possibly serve the best interest of the city in helping this whole area? And could I think of like the Skagit farmers that drag the meandering ditches to deal with water in the winter months, and then they, in the spring they plant and get rid of those ditches. Do we need to spend $750,000 on a pump to shoot it out the 42-inch outfall, or could that somehow be changed to work through the area that we have? And so I know that's why we've got the study going. I just want to make sure we're asking those innovative questions and not just looking at a couple of ditches and saying, well, we can never change this, and it's the way it is.
I think there's a really exciting opportunity here, and I can't speak to whether a serpentine ditch through here will replace the need to deal with a different solution for the flooding down by Burger King. That's an engineering question. I'm not qualified to address it, but I do think there's some exciting opportunities. And as been mentioned by several of you, it goes all the way back to 1995 when the city contemplated acquiring the property. If you look at the Friend Marsh Master Plan, which was adopted by your predecessors in 1998, it shows just that, right? It shows taking advantage of the natural features, but then also the utilitarian features that we can get out of Friend Marsh. Now that we have a vastly improved Windjammer Park, we've developed our trail system through this area a number of years ago. You all know we have the mitigated wetland areas, just to the east of here. This is the next, from a planner's perspective, this is the next big piece that you can make some changes in that serve a functional purpose, but also an open space and an aesthetic and a recreational purpose. I think it's really interesting that the master plan back in 1998, I think, is still as valid today as it was then in terms of its overall concept. Now the size and the configuration and the details and all that stuff is probably going to be much different, but absolutely, I think there's a great opportunity for that. The study, I think, is going to give us the data that we need to be able then to design the facility to take care of that utility purpose that hopefully when it's all done, no one will be able to tell that that's actually what we're doing, right? That would be the cool thing. So I think that's a very real possibility. That's as excited as I'm ever going to get about stormwater.
Councilor Eisen.
Excuse me. If I drag us too far into the weeds on this one, then just stop me and we can talk about it some other time. But as I'm thinking about improvements and or changes and or projects, I'm thinking, is that a environmentally sensitive and or protected area, and or is archaeology a concern? Should I be worried about any of those things at this point?
So cultural resources is a concern, and
if you remember those maps that I put up initially, you know, there's potential for wetlands. We do have wetlands which are environmentally protected. So we need, as we move forward with the planning and any project design, those things have to be taken into consideration.
But they're not deal killers.
Yeah, but they're not deal killers. Gideon has gone out and done some initial analysis out there.
Any other questions? Thank you for a lively conversation. Thank you. Okay. We will move on to affordable housing state sales tax credit for local government follow-up.
So
City Attorney Nikki Esparza.
I am presenting this on behalf of Mr. Oborn today since he is out at a training. This is just a follow-up to the conversation that Mr. Oborn had with you at your last workshop regarding House Bill 1406, which is a tax credit for affordable housing. Just as a quick reminder, this is a credit against the state sales and use tax. It's not a new tax. It's shared revenue. The city just gets a little more and the state gets a little less, which is of course something that we're all in favor of. This tax credit can be used for affordable housing, be it acquisition, maintenance, rehabilitation of affordable housing, and it's restricted to serve populations at 60% or below of the AMI. At the previous workshop, Mr. Oborn presented you with 3 different options. And since that workshop, it has come to staff's attention that there was some sort of miscommunication or misunderstanding as to how Island County was approaching a potential collaboration, which is why we're back here today to talk about this and provide a little clarification. So as a reminder, Mr. Oborn presented 3 options, which included to take the full credit, which is 0.0146%. That wasn't of interest to council because that would have required imposition of a qualifying local tax, which would have meant putting that tax on the ballot. The cost to put it on the ballot perhaps would have been less than or equal to the additional amount of tax that we would have gotten. So council wasn't in support of that. The option that council was in support of was to take the half or the split, which was a 0.0073% tax credit, which would have generated somewhere close to $35,000 a year. So this is where the misunderstanding comes into play. At the time, it was the city's understanding that if we took the split share, that the county would enter into an interlocal with us and the city would sort of act as a pass-through. This would provide the city a seat at the table and a way of having input into what the money is used for. So in communications with Island County following that workshop, it became clear that the interlocal option was not applicable to the split share. So if the city opts to take the split share, it will in fact be responsible for all reporting, managing, and allocating of the funds. We will have to create a new fund. We will have to do all of the reporting requirements that come with this grant because it is a restricted fund grant. And that might be difficult because, as you know, the city doesn't have a human services or housing program, and so it would be starting from scratch essentially. We don't have the experience or the connections or the funding that Island County does, and it might make more sense to let Island County be the one that is doing all of the management of the funds and taking the whole 0.0146%. So the third option is to defer the funds to Island County. And in that situation, the county receives the entire 0.0146% that is generated within the city of Oak Harbor. So this option is actually the option that county envisioned partnering with us on. County is willing to enter into an interlocal agreement with the various municipalities to work together to craft an agreement that outlines how decisions will be made regarding these funds. At this time, they're considering using their Housing Advisory Board as the recommending body, but they're not quite sure yet. But what is clear is that the city would certainly have the ability to weigh in on the terms of the agreement and what our role looks like. Coopville, I know, has already deferred its funds to Island County, and I believe that Langley is going the same direction with the understanding that there will be an agreement in place that talks about how those funds are allocated and used. So obviously the pros are that the county is really in a better position to manage these funds. They've already got programs in place and the city doesn't. The deferral of the funds can be accomplished with simply an email to Department of Revenue saying, hey, we're declining to impose this particular tax. However, staff's preferred alternative is actually to draft a resolution that says expressly, we're deferring these funds and this is why. We'd like it on the record that we are deferring the funds basically in exchange for an agreement that says we do have a seat at the table. So that's staff's preferred alternative. If council is interested in that alternative, we will bring forward a resolution that lays that out. If not, we can certainly bring forward a resolution that has the city taking its split share, but that will then again be followed up with an ordinance that creates a new fund, and we'll have to create some policies and programs to use those funds for. So I am soliciting input as to what you want to see at your next meeting in terms of a resolution.
So
Or
I
a
had
second
I attended a COG meeting this morning, Council of Governments. The other two mayors were there, and they intend to do the resolution that you're asking about. And in fact, they'd like a copy of your resolution to copy that, as a matter of
And I
fact.
guess we'll invent one.
But I think, you know, they're, in our case, the $37,000 a year. Personally, I don't think that's I don't think that's worth trying to administer a separate fund for. We will have a seat at their table.
Yes.
And I'm, you know, not sure how that's going to work.
So, and that would be a part of the agreement that we negotiate. So we could play a role in determining what that seat looks like.
Councilor Larson?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, the first option still isn't an option, and that looks like the second option with the limited funds we would be taking in would be taken up quite a bit by trying to administer those funds. So I'm in favor of relinquishing those with with an agreement that we should have some coordination, collaboration with Island County and how those are spent.
Anyone else? Councilor Wiesner?
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. Doesn't make any sense for us to put, spend money that could be going to help people with affordable housing and spend it on administering these funds. It certainly makes sense to hand that over and gets us a seat at the table,
Yeah.
which is good. So I'm in agreement.
Okay. Okay.
I have my marching orders. Thank you.
So, City Administrator's report. Since he's not here, we have a written report, I guess, in this packet, right? So, read through that, and I believe he's back on Friday. If you've got any questions, don't ask me, ask him on Friday. No, I'm actually familiar with most of this, but any other council business? Okay, seeing none, we'll adjourn.